von der Leyen and the EU Commission to try and prevent this from happening? Because at the moment it is a threat. It's not been implemented.
That's right. Well, the prospect of tariffs is a bit more tangible, I suppose, on the EU side at the moment. But our message is not changing. Our message is keep us out of these unrelated disputes, keep trade in spirits completely tariff-free, as it's been for many years. I mean, we started lifting these tariffs in 1997, and we saw a huge boom after that. Lots of cross investment. It's been very good for all involved, including the UK, by the way. And this is something that we absolutely need to preserve. It's an essential relationship for the EU and for the US, and we cannot afford to have this trade war on our hands. We cannot afford to be used as a bargaining chip in something which has absolutely nothing to do with us.
And is the argument, I suppose, to maybe the US, if you like, that Donald Trump has talked about US champagne. Now, US champagne doesn't exist in the sense that sparkling wine from the Champagne region in France is called champagne. Is there an argument you can make to the US administration, to American consumers, that they lose out here fundamentally on unique European products?
Absolutely. I mean, most of these products on both sides, on the US side, on the EU side, are very unique because you can only produce them in one specific region or one specific country. You can only produce Irish whiskey in Ireland. You can only produce cognac in France. You can only produce bourbon and American whiskey in the US. So from that point of view, these are jobs that are guaranteed in production. We support many sectors upstream, lots of farmers, of course, both in the US and in the EU, glass manufacturers, for instance, as well as many, many jobs in the retail sector, in the hospitality sector. I mean, barmen, restaurants, that's a sector that suffered so much because of COVID. And I think the last thing everyone would want is to hurt all of these real people that are, obviously going to be feeling the damage pretty brutally if these tariffs were to go through. And of course, so would consumers, because consumers would get less choice, and the products would just become unaffordable in some cases, which is obviously what we really want to avoid.
Pauline there from Spirit Europe, representing the wine and spirit makers of the EU. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Well, let's take a look at how the markets are doing this Friday morning. Let's speak to Rebecca McLean, Investment Director at Aberdeen. Very good morning to you. And we're talking about GDP, we're talking about tariffs. It's been a hell of a week, particularly on the tariff front, always hanging on for every word or tweet from President Trump. And the markets have seen a bit of a battering as well, but a little bit of a recovery towards the end of this week.
Yes, it's been a challenging few weeks, particularly for the US stock market. So we've seen the S&P 500, which represents the US companies, fall about 10% from their peak in February. And the more technology-focused index, the NASDAQ, has fallen closer to 14%. And I think what's happened is that there's more uncertainty now than ever around the impact on tariffs. And there's been less of a focus on those more sort of pro-growth agenda items around deregulation and tax cuts than many hoped for at the start of the Trump presidency. So yes, coming off highs for the US market, but it's certainly been a challenging couple of weeks for performance for US companies.
And what's your take on the health of the US economy? I've read lots this week that says we're over-egging how much trouble it might be in. Inflation was actually down a fraction this week. Are you of that view that actually things aren't quite as bad? It's a bit more resilient than some would like to suggest.
Well, taking a step back, the US market has proved to be very resilient over the last couple of years, with GDP growth of about 2 to 3%. But I think what is important is to think about what is happening in the future. And expectations are that the level of GDP growth in the United States will be lower in 2025. Indeed, this week we saw a couple of economists downgrading growth expectations for the US economy to below 2%. And that's what the market is focused on. It's those change in expectations about the level of growth, which is what drives markets. Consumers and businesses are looking at the uncertainty raised by tariffs, the risk on inflation, and that makes it very difficult to make decisions about spending and investment. So I think the key thing to look out for in the US economy, what is the more up-to-date economic data, the unemployment levels, and what's going to happen with that trade policy.
Now, Rebecca, you couldn't make this up, could you? I mean, we live in strange times, you might well say, but Tesla writing to the US government complaining about tariffs. It's quite extraordinary, really, isn't it?
Absolutely. It has been a roller coaster ride for the Tesla shareholders over the last 6 months, with shares doubling from the November period when Trump was elected to their peak in December, and they've now halved since then. So I think, the number of factors here, we've got some question marks about the health of the automotive sector, but in particular for Tesla, they've been facing some challenges around their European sales, where they saw in January a material decline in European deliveries compared to a market that was growing. And I think we need to think about the barriers to entry in the industry. This is a competitive industry. The Chinese producers have been gaining market share. And even today, we saw Mercedes-Benz has released an affordable electric vehicle sedan. So a lot of uncertainty in terms of the ability of the business to return to growth. And the market is watching that closely, considering this company is not priced as an automotive business, it's priced as a technology company. So very little valuation support in the shares.
And just very finally, Rebecca, back home here in the UK, let's talk about house prices, because actually they continue to grow, don't they? And in part, that's because we've got a bit more stabilisation, is that correct, around mortgage rates?
Yeah, we had some data this week which indicated that house prices are still rising in the UK. But I think what was most interesting from the report was to look at some of the regional differences. So stronger growth in the north of England and in Scotland, and more weakness in the south and in London. And I think this speaks to really the affordability challenge in some parts of the UK. I've been speaking to CEOs of UK house builders. They are looking at good order books, pent-up demand for housing, but we're yet to see that recovery in house building volumes, particularly considering the government's target to increase house building volumes. We're not there yet, but we're looking for those green shoots.
OK, Rebecca McClain from Aberdeen, live there in Edinburgh with the markets on this Friday morning. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. OK, you're watching Business Live here on Sky News. Up next, speaking of drink, ahead of St Patrick's Day weekend, why the stock market has never been so competitive. We'll be explaining all that. You'll be pretty thirsty in just a couple of minutes. Stay tuned.
Prime Minister Modi is the most popular politician in the country. He is expected to win his third term in these elections.
Jubilation in the streets, while some emotional.
This is a political victory for Prime Minister Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party, a promise fulfilled.
I'm Neville Lazarus, and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi.
He paid over 50,000 to traffickers to get him to America. Instead, he was kidnapped, tied up, and threatened by smugglers. A commando from the state force walks me through to a Mai Tai village on the front line.
Firing to civilians and they're burning our house.
We cross to the opposite side, held by the cookies.
When they fire, we have to retaliate.
Sky News, get the full story first. Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration.
The enthusiasm is palpable. The young desire change.
These elections are a pivotal moment for the country's economic and political history. The concern here is that the public healthcare system is inadequate.
In a prayer, she's asking God to help understand what happened. I cannot carry on. God, help me. He says his world has crashed. Like him, there are scores of families searching for their loved ones.
Too often have families endured such tragedies for the negligence not only by the administration, but also by spiritual people in this country. Free, wherever you get your news. Even though it has few seats in Parliament, Kashmir is symbolic and very significant. It's often been called a nuclear flashpoint.
We are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club. 4 more years! Free wherever you get your news. I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
1,500 movies? I don't want this flight to end. Flying fly better. Thank you.
Now, this weekend is expected to be one of the busiest of the year for pubs, with a huge increase in BSLs ahead of course, St Patrick's Day on Monday. And it being St Patrick's Day, what better to talk about than Stout, because recent months have seen a huge increase in demand for the black stuff. So much so that there have been suggestions that it may have led to a shortage of Guinness around Christmas. And it has even led Heineken to bringing back its own Murphy Stout after 3 years off the supermarket shelves. Well, let's speak to Will Rice, on-trade director at Heineken UK. So Murphy's is back, is it, Will?
Yeah, Murphy's is back, and Stout's back, most importantly, which is fantastic. The market's been in about 20% growth on Stout recently, and what better way to celebrate St Patrick's Day than with a pint of Stout?
And do we know why that is? Why have consumers, the punters, if you like, in the pubs and even in the supermarkets, decided to kind of go back into Stout again?
Yeah, I think it's a fantastic drink, first and foremost. And I think post-COVID, what you've seen is trying to recreate things that you can't get at home, and a perfect pint of Stout in the pub is a fantastic way to celebrate, to commiserate. We're seeing younger consumers come into Stout, which is great. And as I said, Stout's in growth, 20% growth. And obviously, you know, there's a market leader, but there's a fantastic alternative in Murphy's, which we're seeing in more pubs now. We're in 700 pubs, and we've tripled that distribution over the last year. And we're now hitting the supermarket shelves as well, which is fantastic.
And I see, you know, people talking online about splitting the M rather than the G. I mean, we cannot not talk about Guinness, of course. I mean, it dominates the market. How does, you know, a recognisable brand like Murphy's, but how does that take on Guinness when Guinness is frankly so popular at the moment?
Obviously, it's a market leader, right? And we're just having a bit of fun with Murphy's, frankly. We've got other market leaders in Beer Moretti and Foster's, in Cruz Campo, in Necco. We've got plenty of market leaders. And so we're just having some fun with Murphy's, giving publicans an option that is different. And I think giving consumers a different option as well. 1 in 2 pub goers are going to go to the pub this weekend to celebrate St Patrick's Day, which is just fantastic. And why not? Why not choose a Murphy's? It's a fantastic brand, fantastic liquid, and I think it just offers a great alternative to both us and our customers, most importantly.
Yeah, my director has very cleverly suggested just now that maybe I should do a blind taste test over the weekend to see if I can tell the difference between Guinness and Murphy's. I have to say I'm not necessarily a big stout fan. Just very finally on that, though, have you found that when there is a shortage of Guinness, let's be honest about this, that people do turn to the alternative?
Yeah, of course. We didn't want to let any pub run dry of stout over Christmas, and that's why we've ramped up production. We ramped it up at Christmas time, and we ramped it up now in order to make sure customers have got everything they need for St. Patrick's Day. And do go and do that blind taste test over the weekend, Darren, and let us know what you think.
I will. Will, just on a slightly more serious note, it does seem that almost every interview now I have to mention Donald Trump by name. And we've heard from the US Commerce Secretary in the last couple of minutes. He's doing an interview with Fox Business in the United States, saying it would be fair to impose auto tariffs on car manufacturers everywhere. I'm going to ask you about beer. No suggestion at the moment that it's going to be imposed on beer, but we've just done an interview about the spirits and wine business. How concerned is the overall alcohol trade, if you like, the spirits, the breweries business, that trade wars could come to hit you guys next?
Yeah, we obviously hope not. Of course we do. But I think, frankly, it's just too soon for us to comment. It's breaking news. That's why you're talking about it. And we need to go away and have a look at it for ourselves and work out what we want to do.
But just on that, I mean, I'm sure this is what business do. You plan for the possibilities of these things happening in the future.
Yeah, of course. Of course, you have plans and you scenario plan everything. Of course you do, right? But frankly, on this one, we're tracking the news and making sure that we've got plans in place. But obviously, as I said, we're reviewing it, and it's just a bit too soon for us to comment on what we might do.
OK, Will, thank you very much for your time. Clearly in a busy pub. What was that? 1 in 2 pub goers will have a pint, apparently, in a pub this weekend for St. Patrick's Day weekend. And
That's right.
I will try maybe and do that blind taste test and get back to you which one I thought was better. Will, thank you very much indeed. Will Rice there from Heineken UK. Just to bring you up to date with that breaking news in the last couple of minutes from the US Commerce Secretary, saying that essentially he thinks that it would be fair to impose tariffs on cars from everywhere, if that comes about. Also talking about the Panama Canal, saying that it is fundamental to US security. And Commerce Secretary Ludnick also saying that Donald Trump is going to try to do a deal with TikTok in the time frame he has. Of course, TikTok has been pretty controversial in the United States over the last couple of years. OK, that is it from me on Business Live for this morning. Back, of course, this afternoon at 4:30. Do join me then, if you can. Up next, it is Sam Washington with the rest of the day's news. Do stay tuned for that, and I'll see you a little later on. Goodbye.